All right, being joined by Joe Dancy, University of Oklahoma, part of their oil, gas, energy center there up in the Bakken. Of course, we've got the Energy and Environmental Research Center, the EERC. I think a lot of people might correlate it to that. That's my assumption. Joe, how you doing? And let's transition a little bit into what is the center that you're in charge of down there at the University of Oklahoma?
Well, we have a new center at the law school that deals with energy issues. And, of course, Oklahoma, just like North Dakota, is a huge energy state, energy-producing state. And so with all the issues with regard to regulations, technology, with all the new horizontal drilling and fracking, we address and try to just address issues that need to be decided as we go further and further along with our, these days 2 or 3 mile long laterals in some cases. At least they're technologically available. So it's an exciting center. So we are a mix of law, regulation, business, technology, and I'm the director, which is it's been a lot of fun. You meet some very interesting people that have done some very interesting things.
After we talk about NAPE, I want to remind me to bring up a mineral rights case in North Dakota that I'd love to just introduce to you so you can take a look at on your own and maybe ask you if you have an opinion on it or not. I'll leave it up to you on that. But it's really interesting with flooded land and dams and mineral rights. So it's really neat. So folks, stick around. Joe Dancy, of course, he's down at NAPE, and NAPE is in, I think it's 25th year. And they're kind of having a nice little celebration down there. And we're going to have Mr. Dancy on to talk about, the mood a little bit, maybe what some people are talking about, and maybe even get into a specific or two. So let's start with the 5,000-foot view, if you will. What's the general vibe and mood down at NAPE this year in Houston?
I tell you, Jay, it's much more positive than it has been last year and even the year before. And part of that is obviously oil prices are much more robust, and quite frankly, at least in our opinion, or my opinion, I think they're going to go higher, much higher than the $63 to $65 they've been trading at here lately. So everybody seems, and the mood across the registrants and the exhibitors is very positive, and I think you can even see that. I've been told, and this is sort of unofficial numbers, they've had 13,000 people register this year. Last year they had 9,000. So it just goes to show you, number one, there's more interest. And when you walk around and talk to people, and even everything from the people, running title to the geologists, they have a few people here that are, selling fossilized artwork for $4,000 or $5,000. And I sort of ask them as a general rule, you think people are a little more optimistic this year, when you're buying a $5,000 piece of fossilized art, and they said, there's no question, this year has been the best year in 2 or 3 years for them, for these interests, and as well as, again, the geologists seem to say, and the companies that are turning these deals and the financiers seem to say that, things are looking up, and I agree 100%. This is going to be 2018 is going to be a very, very good year for the oil industry and also for the Bakken.
What are you hearing in terms of cost savings? I'll give you a couple examples. Frac sand, of course, that's probably the most nationwide known example of how oil and gas companies were saving some money. I just interviewed a guy earlier today on the environmental side of things, Tidwell Industries. He was talking about how they're saving a lot of man hours because of their innovative proprietary product, that sort of thing. What are you hearing in terms of the efficiency side of things, how people are saving money? Is it through innovation, wireless for things? Is it less man hours, I guess? Are people saving money?
Well, actually, you talk to these people that are, actually involved with some of the technology, and, we continue to make technological improvements, but I did ask around this morning about service costs, because as you know, as industry recovers, we have more rigs being put back in the service, and to get people and to get equipment, that has been stacked, you got to refurbish it to make it available. And they said things are we're being more efficient, but that's being offset by the fact that you got to pay more money for services, and especially frac crews. They were telling me, at least a couple people, and these were in the Permian Basin, they said, it's tough to get frac crews in the Permian Basin that you feel comfortable with, and when you do, you generally, you try to get them tied up so they'll frac a new number of your wells, and are not, you're not waiting unduly long for that. But past that, the service costs, though, I said, are the jumps shocking as far as and they said, no, it's just a gradual inflation of cost, which is actually, Jason, it's very good, because service companies, as you probably know, they took a brunt when people stopped drilling. A lot of service companies are just hanging on, and it's nice to see. Hopefully now they're making a little better margin, and we're attracting, or at least can attract some people back into the business as far as just employees.
Well, that's good news. Yeah, this contraction period was getting a little long in the tooth. It's about time for us to expand our portfolios a little bit, and it'd be nice to, for the service companies to make a little money, because it's a give and take, it's a sacrifice and a give back type thing, and the oil and gas industry is usually pretty good about that, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be going forward. What are you hearing when it comes to water? Another conversation I had last week was with a gentleman, and he brought up a good point. Really at the end of the day, especially on the western side of things, you can't have a conversation and not boil it down to water. And so are people having sourcing issues, disposing issues? Talk to me a little bit about the world of water in the oil and gas world right now down at NAPE.
Actually, that's a very hot topic that you just hit on. And of course, every area is a little bit different. Of course, North Dakota, the Permian Basin, even in Oklahoma, we're not water rich as far as having a bunch of resources that are readily available in many cases. And I know, at least the Permian Basin, some of the people I talked to this morning, they said that the amount of water being used, especially on the Permian Basin and in the Eagle Ford, has increased substantially in the last 3 years. Part of it's because the well bores are longer, but part of it is they're sticking in much more frac sand, and they need much more fluid to jam that stuff in there. And so water is a concern. And going forward, apparently, we haven't had people not being able to complete a frac or frac their wells yet, but they say going forward, as the rig count continues to increase and as we use more and more water, it's a concern, and it's concern for both the companies as well as, obviously, depending on where it's being sourced from, it's a concern of your surface owner and your agricultural sector. So I did talk, and it's been a couple of years ago now, with your North Dakota agricultural commissioner, and they were actually doing a study, or proposing a study, to try to see if we could get some of the produced water, the saline water that comes out with oil and gas, and actually have it recycled and being able to be used efficiently for agricultural purposes. The problem is the technology is so darn expensive still. And it's still in the infancy, but that is a concern, and the regulators are thinking about it. The companies are thinking about it. If I could figure out a business angle here, how to source and sell water, that might be more valuable than oil when all is said and done. But we'll see. It's a problem that's people are looking at and they're concerned about. Nobody seems to have a solution, Jason. So it's interesting to hear them talk. And from a legal standpoint, and being a lawyer and an engineer, it creates some really interesting issues.
Yeah, I just talked to the health department's water director last week, Division of Water, and he said that their studies up in the Bakken were looking at 20 times the amount of water is going to be needed than what they originally anticipated. So what you were talking about down in the Permian, what you're talking about down in the Eagle Ford, is matching up with what they're finding out in the Bakken too. To me, this sounds like it's a little bit industry wide that they're finding out. For one, they either need more water or they're doing production much faster than what they thought they could do before. But it does bring up an interesting thing to where water, that's a tough issue to really have a civilized conversation, because it becomes very passionate. There becomes a lot of emotion involved with water, life of water, that sort of thing. I wanted to bring up that case real quick, as long as we're on the topic of water. Lake Sakakawea, it's a big reservoir we have, lake reservoir, hydro dam type of a thing, and they flooded it back in, I want to say, the 60s in order to create this project. And maybe it was the 80s, I forgot. Anyway, the Army Corps of Engineers came in and did this, and they bought the surface rights, but not the mineral rights. Well, nobody said anything because there wasn't any oil in North Dakota at the time. Well, now there's oil. Well, the state's coming in and saying they own them. Well, the landowners have the deeds and have everything else that goes with it. And so the state's been suing these landowners, and now it's been decided all the way to the state Supreme Court that the landowners won because they actually have the deeds that go back 100 years. The state's now like trying to reintroduce and get those mineral rights back. Are you familiar with this case at all? Has it made it all the way down there or anything along those lines?
No, I'm not familiar with the case, but it is interesting. I mean, if you own the minerals, I mean, you have a protected fee interest right, just like you own the surface when you sever them. And it sounds like the state took the surface and the minerals were retained. And so if you want to condemn and take those minerals now, legally, you have a constitutionally protected property right. In theory, this is talking off the top of my head, not reading the case, not knowing the facts, is a dangerous place for a lawyer to go. But I will say, generally, if you're going to take the minerals and you're the state or federal government, you have to compensate the party you're taking it from, because it's like I say, just like I came in and someone said, "Hey, we're going to take your house and make it into a park," and you can do that, but you have to compensate, the owner. That's the way the country works, as well as the Constitution, et cetera. So. The positive thing when you get involved in some of these issues, especially with regard to dams, and this is probably not an issue, but with directionally drilling now, a lot of times you put a dam or a lake and you couldn't access or had a difficulty accessing the hydrocarbons because you can't go out and put a floating barge or anything in the middle of the lake. You can directionally drill now to get those hydrocarbons, which makes them a little more marketable and a little more valuable than maybe in the past, but that's a technological development, really. So that's my streaming thoughts. Knowing nothing about the facts or the case, but I am going to look up. I will find out what's going on, because it sounds like a very interesting situation.
Yeah, I'll send you the links. The only reason I kind of sidebarred off a little bit there was because I've been on record to say I've been covering the Bakken for now about, I'll call it close to 7 years, and this particular case is the most bizarre one I've seen that's come out of the Bakken. It's just so different to me how. Anyway, I'll send it to you and take a look at it. Sorry to sidebar off a little bit. Getting back on track here, Joe Dancy, Oklahoma State University. We're talking about NAPE. He's down there right now as we speak. He's been kind of our boots on the ground down there, trying to just find out what's going on, where things are heading. And the other thing I wanted to ask, it sounds to me like water solutions are going to be a big, hot industry that somebody could make some money over the next decade. Anything else kind of percolating to the top? Any industry that you're hearing more and more about that some people listening right now might get their entrepreneurial innovation engines going?
Well, not really. I could think of. I did ask around and say, gee, is there, what are the hottest areas now if you're selling a prospect? And of course, it all depends on the company and where they're at and their leasehold. But it seems to be still the Permian is, sort of the movie star, and next is the Scoop and Stack, which obviously being from University of Oklahoma, that's positive for us from an economic standpoint. And the technology as you mentioned earlier, Jason, as everything evolves, we're finding that, with these wells, as we become more efficient, we're able to extract more from different formations. So they'll be drilling the Permian and the Scoop and Stack for quite some time, as well as the Bakken. And I guess let me add this in for the Bakken folks. And it is a more generally, because for a number of reasons, a little more expensive to produce up there. But as oil prices go up, the Bakken companies become much, much more valuable. And so if you're going to invest in, as oil goes upward, and I actually just increased our estimates for 2018 West Texas Intermediate average price from $67 to $72 a barrel for a number of reasons. The Bakken is going to be economically very attractive because the higher cost basins, you essentially go from breaking even to be becoming profitable. And when you're in the Permian, it's a little lower cost, and it's just sort of incremental profit. It's the way the economics work. It's much more attractive. So if I was a speculator and I thought oil prices is going to where I think it's going to go, which $72 a barrel is my call. I think Goldman Sachs even had a higher number, believe it or not. Some of these Bakken companies that have been, and a lot of the companies have been beat up badly, the producers, the Bakken companies might be worth speculating on because the reserves are there, and the question is, economically, can you produce them? And you get where we're at now and move up above 70, and I think the answer is you can produce them and make some money. So
I interviewed Sirin Nadeau from Tocqueville Asset Management a few weeks ago about different plays that were good from an investor standpoint, and you bring up the investment standpoint, and he kind of, we talked about the Bakken a little bit, and he brought up the Permian right away. He said, Permian, that's number one. I think he said 80% of the shale play activity is going to come out of the Permian over the next decade. That was quite a statement, 80%. I didn't even double check on it. It was just like, oh, well, the Permian's going to be a hot place. Got it. But my argument with the Bakken is that even when it was $30 a barrel, we were still producing 1 million barrels a day. And that's incredible. From 10 years ago, we were not even doing 100,000. So what that told me was even at $30 and $40 and $50 a barrel, at least we're still having activity. Whether they're making money or not, I don't know. You understand the idea of momentum versus not having wells, because trying to get all the guys back and trying to get that momentum going again costs a lot more than sometimes just keeping the momentum going. But what he said was, he goes, the Bakken kind of is like a rock. You kind of know what you're getting there. You know your price points really well. You know your sweet spot. You know your fringe zones. And I thought that was a great way to put it, type of a thing. With that being said, and with your actual geographical location of continental resources, what do you make of that the Bakken is kind of a safe, steady, old shoe Eddie type of a thing? And then talk to me about a little bit about continental resources and how they view it.
Well, actually, the number one, I agree with his analysis. It is a sort of an old shoe that we sort of know how it fits, and the technology, like I say, the wells are getting better day after day. And the other thing about the Bakken that concerned me, well, everybody in almost every play initially, is your takeaway, your pipelines, the ability to get stuff out of there, the flaring that you had to do because you didn't have a pipe. But the takeaway in the Bakken area has gotten much, much better. So when you drill a well, you can get the oil sold, you get the gas, taken care of, and the regulators aren't going to shut you in for flaring. So that's real positive. Going on the Continental, I don't follow them closely from an investment standpoint. However, just strategy-wise, number one, I think it's an excellently managed company. Number two, I think they're well-positioned. Number three, I think if you look in the past at what they've done, you just have to be impressed with the company, with the leadership, with everything else. And that is one company that, again, this is my personal view. If you want to look at the Bakken as an investment, they were somebody I would look closely at. and evaluate. And of course, make your own call. But from what I've seen, I've been impressed.
But even from, take the investment side out of it, I guess I was looking at it more from just, I would think through sheer osmosis of industry, would know quite a bit about their activity. For example, I spoke with what's his name? I think Warren Henry, and he was talking about the scoop stack play. You mentioned that. Then they opened up a big a contract over to China, exporting oil outside of there. I guess I should have rephrased it a little bit differently. How much activity, how much involvement with the university systems and some of these oil and gas administrative type of things they run from the state, like you're involved with, is Continental involved with? I would think that they would be, from a technological standpoint, from the legal standpoint, that sort of thing. Are they pretty much? Because they seem to be a leader in a lot of areas.
Well, I know they're a big supporter of the University of Oklahoma, and I really have not been directly involved with them, but I do know, and part of it is there is a lot of technological transfer where the University of Oklahoma has, a fantastic engineering school, a fantastic landman school, and, you're looking for talent, and especially engineering talent, and you have a study of how you best complete in the Bakken. And, every well, let me tell you, an executive told me about 5 years ago when this all started really down in Dallas, and he said, every well is like baking a cake. Everybody's going to bake it a little differently, and your recipe is going to change over time because the length of the well, how many stages you have, how much sand you use, how much fluid you use, what type of additives you use, it all depends, and it's extremely complex when you figure out you want the ultimate completion. So it gets to be very technical, and so you go to a university where you have, these experts in engineering and geology and rock mechanics, and I know Continental, and I not only, a lot of companies utilize universities, not only OU, but a number of institutions across the country that specialize in petroleum engineering and rock mechanics and fracking, et cetera. And I know Continental, like I said, they have a very good relationship from what I've heard with OU. Although I haven't dealt directly with them, I'd love to deal directly with them as part of the Energy Center at the law school. But that will, sure I will at some future date.
Yeah, and of course the only reason I bring up Continental as an example, and you're right, there's so many of these other companies are doing that, but based on the Bakken and your Oklahoma roots there, I thought I'd bring that up. Okay, let's wrap up here. Dancy, Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma, part of their. And what's the actual official name of the research and a center that you work at there, the law one?
Well, it's actually it's a long name that they put together. It's the Oklahoma College of Law. And essentially, I just call it the Energy Center. That's the easiest for people to remember. But it fits on. It fills up a business card. Put it that way. And again, we got a good time. I've been there a little over a year, and it's been dynamic. It's been interesting, as we mentioned earlier at NAPE, with the improvement of the industry and improvement of prices. And I think going forward this year is going to be 2018 could be a very, very good year for industry, for jobs, for companies, for educational institutions, because, in states like, North Dakota and Oklahoma, where, severance taxes, are based on sales prices, it's going to be a better year than it has been for a number of our states, including North Dakota, including Oklahoma, and Texas for that matter too.
All right, so kind of wrap it up here. Final thoughts, final words.